She thought she was careful. Separate phones, private emails, business trips with meetings. What she didn't count on was a husband who thinks like an investigator, not a victim. By the time the truth surfaced, it was already too late to hide. I woke to a hollow weight pressing against my chest, a quiet emptiness that had been growing for months. Elizabeth lay beside me, her body still, her presence distant, as if a transparent wall had been erected between us overnight. I felt the illusion of our marriage collapse in that silence. The bedroom, meticulously arranged, every surface and corner in its place, now felt staged. A theater of habits repeated until they no longer meant anything. I slid from the bed without disturbing her, my movements deliberate and precise. I opened the dresser drawers and removed only what I would need for a week. A laptop, a small stack of documents, my wallet, a set of essential clothing folded with care. Each action was measured, intentional, as if I were dismantling not just the room, but a chapter of my life. I left the key on the nightstand, alongside photographs that had once held warmth, but now seemed heavy with absence. My fingers lingered over one image, a younger Elizabeth, smiling at a sunlit park, and I let it fall back into the stack, untouched. I moved quietly through the house, noting the faint hum of the refrigerator, the steady tick of the hallway clock, the kitchen, the living room, the empty hallways. I cataloged them in my mind, each step confirming that the space no longer belonged to me. I felt neither anger nor sorrow, only a precise, cold certainty. Outside, the winter wind struck my face, sharp and unyielding, carrying with it the scent of snow and distant traffic. I tightened my coat, shoved my hands into the pockets, and walked to the car. The streets were nearly empty, the city dim and distant under streetlights smeared by frost. I started the engine and pulled onto the road, headlights cutting through the darkness. My destination was an old friend's apartment in the Northern District, a place that once felt familiar, but now offered an unclaimed corner of thought. The drive was silent, measured. Each block passed under me like a metronome, counting the steady passage of this new reality. I did not look back at the house, did not consider the life I had left behind. My mind organized itself in the quiet, every decision that awaited, every calculation I would make in the coming hours. The road stretched ahead, empty and neutral, a canvas for control, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of clarity. I had nothing but what I carried and the space to think, and that was enough. I began with the accounts, opening online banking portals and scrolling through balances, transactions, and pending charges. Each entry was cataloged, copied, and exported into a spreadsheet I built as methodically as a technician would diagram a malfunctioning engine. Credit cards, savings, retirement accounts, investment portfolios. All were laid bare, every number cross-referenced with receipts, statements, and prior records. Patterns emerged in the anomalies, charges that did not match explanations, payments to hotels and restaurants I had never visited, transfers that raised silent questions. I marked each irregularity, noting dates, amounts, and context, creating a map of deviation and oversight. I moved next to the legal documents, prenuptial agreements and contracts stored in neat folders. I read slowly, deliberately, my eyes scanning the clauses that demanded transparency, honesty, and financial disclosure. Each word confirmed what I already suspected, but had not named aloud. The realization that Elizabeth had violated these terms settled over me with the weight of certainty. I did not feel anger. I did not feel betrayal in the way others might expect. I felt clarity. The situation was no longer a tangle of emotional entanglement, but a set of variables to analyze and manage. I organized the evidence systematically: dates of deposits, credit card slips, bank transfers, recurring expenses. I cross-checked travel records with explanations, noting every mismatch and anomaly. My hands did not tremble. My heart did not race. I felt like a diagnostician inspecting a failing system, documenting every irregularity, every deviation from protocol. Emotion had been neutralized, replaced by the precision of procedure. Once the financial picture was mapped, I reviewed the prenuptial clauses again, confirming my leverage. The rules of the agreement were clear, and the violations were concrete. The path forward required no improvisation, only adherence to procedure. I drafted a list of steps, sequential and prioritize. Secure my personal funds, limit joint access, preserve evidence, document anomalies, and prepare for legal counsel. Each action was a calculated maneuver, a move in a chess game where the rules were explicit, and the opponent's behavior had revealed itself. I realized the importance of timing and control. Emotional reactions would cloud judgment, and any hesitation could reduce the effectiveness of the strategy. Pain, disappointment, even the faint pulse of loss were acknowledged and cataloged like data points. But they were not allowed to dictate action. Every document I touched, every calculation I recorded, every note I made became part of a framework for control. The house of certainty I built in my mind was more substantial than any room I had left behind. Finally, the decision to involve an attorney crystallized. The work I had done made the next steps clear. Consultation would not be about pleading or negotiating sentiment, but about translating facts into enforceable strategy. Each file, each screenshot, each record became a tool, a weapon in the precise restoration of authority over my own life. I moved through this process without pause, without hesitation, and without reflection beyond what was necessary to maintain clarity. By the time I sat back, I had converted confusion into order, personal anguish into methodical strategy, and uncertainty into a map of control. I returned to the house in Chicago while Elizabeth was at work, moving through rooms with quiet purpose. The air smelled faintly of her perfume, a lingering residue that had once felt familiar, but now registered only as background. I went straight to the home office, where her old laptop rested in a drawer, forgotten. It powered on without resistance, still connected to her cloud accounts, an invisible bridge to files she believed were private. I accessed messages, emails, and photographs, opening a window into months of deliberate concealment. The digital trail unfolded systematically. Hotel reservations in Milwaukee, Independence, and St. Louis were clearly documented, each with dates, addresses, and payment confirmations. Emails to a man named Marcus Reynolds revealed a consistent pattern of secret meetings and arrangements. Photographs confirmed locations and occasions, aligning precisely with financial transactions recorded on joint accounts and credit cards. Each file I opened, each screenshot I captured, each reservation I cross-referenced became a piece of a timeline that left no room for ambiguity. I worked like an engineer diagnosing a complex system failure. Each anomaly was noted, verified, and integrated into a chronological record. Receipts were matched to locations, messages were tied to dates and times, and patterns of repeated deception became undeniable. I built a master document that captured every detail, layering information in spreadsheets, visual timelines, and cross-check evidence logs. There was no chaos in my movements, no emotional outburst, only methodical precision. Once all relevant data had been identified, I duplicated files to multiple encrypted drives and uploaded them to a secure cloud account unknown to her. Backups were confirmed, files verified, encryption tested, ensuring that evidence would remain intact and accessible when needed. I moved through the house as silently as I had entered, each step deliberate, leaving nothing disturbed, nothing to indicate my presence. As I closed the door behind me, the weight of the house no longer pressed on me. The chaos of betrayal had been transformed into structure, the uncertainty of suspicion into a detailed, incontrovertible record. I felt a sense of control, not triumph, not vindication, but clarity and preparedness. I had converted the unknown into evidence, and with it, the path forward was now defined and navigable. I delivered all the evidence I had meticulously gathered to a divorce attorney in Chicago, someone known for handling high-stakes cases with precision and discretion. The office was quiet, filled with the faint scent of leather and polished wood, a space designed for focus and strategy rather than comfort. I laid out the organized files, encrypted drives, spreadsheets, and timelines across the desk, each document cataloged and cross-referenced. Every item was accounted for: bank statements, credit card transactions, hotel bookings, emails, photographs, and digital correspondence. The attorney examined each piece with a practiced eye, nodding at the clarity of the chronology and the precision of the documentation. Our work was methodical. We began by reviewing the marriage contract in its entirety, isolating clauses that mandated honesty, transparency, and financial disclosure. I watched as the attorney highlighted passages, noting specific breaches by Elizabeth. Each violation was paired with corroborating evidence from my collected materials. The strategy took shape not as a personal vendetta, but as a calculated, procedural approach. We mapped the exact sequence for submitting filings, calculating dates and deadlines to minimize the possibility of manipulation or obstruction. Timing became as critical as the evidence itself. I recorded every meeting, every adjustment, and every recommendation in a notebook, treating each page as an extension of the case rather than a reflection of my emotions. There was no satisfaction in seeing her breaches confirmed, only the steady rhythm of logic and preparation. Legal strategy merged with operational discipline. Each action was a measure of control. Each decision weighed against possible contingencies. The attorney explained potential responses, counterarguments, and the likely outcomes, and I constructed decision trees in my mind, anticipating each scenario with precision. As the sessions continued over several days, I compiled exhibits, formatted affidavits, and created backup copies of every document. I ensured that digital files were encrypted, physical files organized in a secure briefcase, and every sequence of events clearly demonstrated patterns of deception and breach of contract. The preparation transformed personal betrayal into a structured, defensible legal position, converting emotional turmoil into methodical leverage. When the final set of documents was ready, I reviewed everything once more, verifying every number, every date, every link between evidence and contractual obligation. The process left no margin for error. I left the office with a sense of clarity, not vindication. I had converted suspicion and uncertainty into a detailed, actionable legal framework. The case was now a system I could navigate with exactness, where logic governed every step and the path forward was defined, precise, and in my control. The filing of the divorce documents was executed with deliberate precision. I had ensured that Elizabeth would receive the notice in the middle of a high-stakes work meeting, knowing that the timing would maximize exposure without my physical presence. I observed the unfolding events from a distance, relying on updates from my attorney, email confirmations, and legal tracking systems. The notification arrived just as her colleagues were presenting quarterly projections. I could see in the reports the subtle shifts in the room, the quick glances, the hesitation, the barely concealed confusion. Elizabeth's composure faltered, though she tried to maintain a professional facade. Every detail of the reaction, every misstep, was noted and catalogued in my mind, though not with satisfaction, only with the cold clarity of observation. The documents themselves were incontrovertible. Each clause of the marriage contract that had been violated was meticulously cited, accompanied by evidence of financial misappropriation and personal deception. Credit card statements, hotel reservations, electronic communications, and photographs, all correlated precisely with the timeline I had constructed over months. Her efforts to obscure transactions and trips were rendered irrelevant by the systematic record-keeping. I recognized the dissonance between her attempts at secrecy and the transparency of the data I had compiled. There was no triumph in watching her exposure. Instead, there was the quiet acknowledgement that the months of manipulation and lies could no longer hold sway. The process extended over weeks, with procedural filings, court scheduling, and the eventual service of final orders. Throughout this, I maintained a detached observation, tracking each procedural milestone, each confirmation of document acceptance, and each filing timestamp. My focus remained on accuracy, ensuring that no opportunity for challenge or delay could be exploited. The final court decree, issued in January, reflected the careful strategy we had employed. The house was sold, and all financial holdings were divided strictly according to the marriage contract and verified records. Elizabeth received only a portion of the original down payment and reimbursed shared expenses. The remaining assets, funds accrued from investments, and control over joint accounts reverted to me in full compliance with legal provisions. Even as the legal closure approached, there was no celebration, no sense of revenge. Instead, a profound calm settled over me, a recognition that autonomy and self-determination had been restored. The months of uncertainty, investigation, and documentation had culminated not in spectacle or confrontation, but in the precise reestablishment of order. I understood that the public exposure of her breaches, while strategically significant, was merely a component of a larger structure. The reclaiming of my life on my terms. Every action had been deliberate, every observation methodical, and every outcome aligned with the rational framework I had maintained since the first moment I suspected betrayal. In the quiet aftermath, I felt the tangible weight of regained control, the subtle shift from chaos to structured clarity, and the restoration of personal sovereignty that no court could quantify but which I experienced fully in the stillness of that January winter. I moved to a quiet suburb on the outskirts of Chicago, seeking a life measured not by appearances, but by the rhythm of my own choices. The house I purchased overlooked the lake, its still waters reflecting a sky I could watch without interruption, a private witness to the passage of time. I reorganized my routines, mapped new routes to work, and established a schedule that no longer depended on the habits or moods of another. My role as a manager at the automotive company demanded precision, accountability, and consistency. And in that structure, I found a form of control that had been absent for years. Every decision, every report, every operational adjustment was mine alone, and the clarity of cause and effect restored a quiet authority I had long missed. I revisited old friendships, reconnecting with people whose presence had been steady through the years, untainted by the turbulence of my marriage. Morning runs along the lakeshore and evening walks through empty streets became rituals, small acts of independence that gradually accumulated into a sense of grounded stability. Each step, each measured breath, reinforced the idea that autonomy was not loud or dramatic but persistent, subtle, and deeply satisfying. The house, the commute, the work. They were not achievements to boast of but frameworks within which I could exist without external interference. Each day a confirmation that life could be structured on my terms. Romantic life became a landscape of caution and observation. Honesty, consistency, and respect replaced excitement or intensity as benchmarks. I noticed the details that once went unnoticed. The reliability of a smile, the predictability of a gesture, the absence of contradiction between words and actions. Trust was no longer assumed. It was earned through evidence, as it had to be in every other domain of my life. Emotional calm settled over me, not as a burst of relief, but as a slow, steady recognition of self-reliance. The past no longer provoked rage or regret. It existed as a record, a reference for choices I would not repeat, a map of missteps that guided future paths. I understood that true strength lay not in confrontation or public display, but in the disciplined cultivation of a life I controlled. Daily decisions, adherence to principles, and the quiet enforcement of personal boundaries became my markers of victory. Dignity, once tested and nearly lost, now resided in the deliberate management of my own world. Social recognition mattered little. What endured was the internal architecture of self-respect, the infrastructure of autonomy I had painstakingly reconstructed. Each evening, watching the lake darken into night, I acknowledged the continuity of my existence. A life reclaimed from disruption, ordered by rationality, and guided by the understanding that control over self was the ultimate form of freedom. Every morning thereafter, I moved forward with that awareness, every measured action a reaffirmation of rebirth, every silent choice a declaration that my life, in all its dimensions, belonged to me alone.